podcast for those who suffer, which is everyone.
It's a space where we can speak honestly about what it feels like to be in desolate places without losing hope.
Welcome to In the Thicket. Today's episode is all about fraternal correction. So we share a little bit about what fraternal correction is, where you can find it in scripture, and then we talk about our own experiences of being on the receiving end or the giving end of fraternal correction, and how it's really based in communion and humility, and really ultimately that relationship with the Lord and that desire for holiness and communion with Him and others. We hope it's helpful for you. God bless. Welcome back to In the Thicket, everyone. You
Hello.
are here with, I'm Erin Kinsella, and I'm joined by co-hosts.
Rachel D'Souza.
And Nicole Richard-Williams.
Yeah.
Fantastic, yes, and
Fantastic.
we,
It's like a
we were
Midwestern
just
mom.
saying,
Fantastic.
fantastic. That was like I used to talk sometimes and talk about how God, you know, you might be in the South when God has 3 syllables, like Gawada.
You
know what I mean?
It's true. Actually, that was one of the things that when I moved down to Tennessee, that was the hardest for me to discern in accents, because it would be like a vowel that I'm used to hearing as like a clean vowel is now like a diphthong.
Right.
And it would just take my ear a second to be like, what are they?
What are you
Oh,
saying?
yeah.
I love that word, diphthong.
Right?
It's so fun.
It's true.
Today
It's very good.
in one of my classes, we talked about Plato and the forms and the chairness of the chair, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And my awesome professor, who I love very much, he just said chair so many times that I was like, I started to lose connection with the meaning of the word chair and just started
sounds like a
listening to the
sound.
sound. Yeah. And it's
That's right.
actually such a weird
Mhm.
sound.
Yeah. Like maybe that was intentional. So he was like getting you to
I don't
drop
know.
all your preconceived notions of chair.
Maybe. But no, but
And,
that's
like,
important in the form. So no.
Yeah, that's true.
No,
That's
no.
true. The
See,
and the
because-
phantasms.
Yeah.
When I think about in my field, I'm like working with kids a lot, and often it's sensory things. So when you were talking about Play-Doh and the forms, like my mind went to Play-Doh and like the different forms that you can make with Play-Doh.
Sure. Yes.
You know?
I love that.
My sister caved this week because like first week of school, all that. And she picked up some magic sand off of Buy Nothing that she saw, which is, if anybody does not know what kinetic sand is, it's like whatever magnified or magnetic sand kind of thing. So it like all sticks together, but then it kind of also clumps away like sand, but it's just very fun. But it's, I mean, just imagine taking the beach and putting it on your kitchen counter and letting your kids play with it. It's, you know, it's a bit of a challenge, especially if you don't like sand. Yeah.
Deep act of motherly love.
And this is the story I was going to share with you guys about my nephew Nico, who's like 3.5. So no, he's almost 4. Anyways, he the other day my brother-in-law like took something away from him, and he was like very mad about it. So he went up to the counter. There was like this jar of candy things that he got, and he took the candy and like looked at my brother and like dumped the candy into the basket on the counter. So like not everywhere, just in the basket. Right. And then he took a marker and he like looked at my brother-in-law, like wrote on the basket with the marker, and then he was like this is what you forget, Daddy.
So cute.
Instead of this is what you get. And he just keeps saying it, and my older nephew is 7 is like losing his mind because he thinks it's hilarious.
7? That's insane.
I know. Anyway, so that was my week, was basically spent laughing at them. How about you guys? How are you doing this week?
I'm kind of beat.
Yeah.
I'm kind of beat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's all of it.
I'm similar. I shouldn't be complaining. I can't believe it's only Tuesday though. Like I feel like it's later in the week. I'm just tired. Just like, you know, regular, plain old tired. It's okay.
Yeah. But I feel a little bit like it's the season too, you know?
It is, yeah.
Does it, like, for fibro things, fall is always hard for me because it's just a hard transition. I always have a flare and whatever. So it's just, but I can't, like, is it just in general that way for everybody? Like, do you guys have a little bit of fall blues when it's like, does it make you tired? Does it make you?
No, I usually like the fall. I mean, I like all the seasons, but I like the start of school. Normally I'm like, oh, like it's a new year and it feels nice and fresh and lovely.
Mhm.
And especially when you're in school, like I wasn't in school, I spent some time out of school and working and stuff like that. And you do kind of miss that. Hey, there's a kickstart in
Right.
sort of the 3/4 of the way into the year where you kind of get a little
new
surge of energy.
Right.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
it's kind of nice. But this year I just have a lot on my plate, that like an unusual amount on my plate.
Right.
And it's sort of like I had to sort of pedal to the metal right from day one in a really intense way. And so I feel like I've lived like a month in the last like week and a half, but it's going to be that way sort of for the next few months. So I think which feels good in a weird way. It feels like purposeful. And I like that. There's a sense of like, yeah, I've got stuff to do and I have a plan and I'm sort of like busy in the best sense of the word. And that there's something that feels good about that and like about that. But I also just physically, like I woke up this morning, I was just like totally physically spent, and I was like, oh man, like I couldn't even push myself to like move quickly. I just was like, I have to go really slow.
Yep. Yeah. Hear that?
Done, and so it's just kind of trying to not be discouraged by that, because sometimes the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
And this is just in a very practical, not in the biblical sense, but just in a like, my brain is like, yes, let's do this. And my body's like, and stop.
Yeah. Body's like, what? Why?
We'll like have a picture of you at the end of the term, and like your hair will be like in like this crazy bun on the side. You'll have like makeup on half your face only.
Oh no. Yeah. We'll get a picture at the end of the year like that. Whether it's true or not, we'll just stage it.
Yeah. For both anybody who's listening right now, you could just say a prayer. Just say a prayer for Rachel and for her sanity, and say a prayer for Nicole and her sanity, because she's finishing off all the PhD stuff and all the waiting to get all the, so just like things, just all the things.
Yeah. Pray for us. Pray for all
just
of us.
Pray.
We would love that.
I mean, I'll always take your prayers anyways. I'm all right though.
Like pumpkin spice latteing it up.
I love them.
Oh my gosh. Oh, you guys. So speaking of lattes, I do not drink coffee. I cannot handle caffeine. It does not make me less tired, but it makes my brain go even faster, and it makes it very hard to focus. And I just I can get a lot done, but then it's kind of shoddy work a little bit. Anyways, but about every 6 months, I forget why I don't drink coffee. And then I try something with caffeine again, just because. Right. And then I'm like, oh, this is why. And then I don't let it go. So excellent. That was my today, where I was meeting up with someone for coffee. So I went to the counter of the coffee shop and ordered tea. And they didn't have any tea yet because it's like a new coffee shop. So I was like, okay. And I was so tired today. I was like, you know what? It's early in the afternoon. I'll just get a coffee. So I did. And oh my gosh, it was just like,
it's terrible.
It was just, I don't even know how to describe it, but my body still felt tired. My brain still felt tired, but it was just, all my thoughts were moving very quickly. It's kind of
nice.
It was very, so now I remember, oh yeah, this is why.
Yeah. For some reason that makes me want to ask people who, like, I saw an interview with somebody who was like a consistent meth user who described something similar. So
honestly, I don't know.
Like, maybe.
That was my thought today. I'm like, I wonder if this is what like cocaine feels like or something. Anyways,
funny.
Coffee is the hardest
none
drug
of us,
I'll ever
you can
do.
tell, none of us are
maybe that's just like, I was like, maybe we're really lame, and we're not lame. It's not lame to not use cocaine.
That's right.
That is not
that's right.
That's pretty
I agree with you, Rachel. I don't think
I feel like we're not great tired conversations. When you just go in these crazy directions, you're like, I don't.
Sorry.
Okay, listen.
This is a case in point of our tired brains.
That's proof. Yes,
proof that we're
back.
Exactly.
Where our brains are.
Exactly. That's right. Okay, reel her back in. So let's introduce the topic for today. So the topic for today is fraternal correction. So
actually, Erin, I think just
you're wrong.
That's right. Which is okay. So we're having this kind of series about talking about like the ground coming out from beneath you a little bit, or that experience of like thinking things were one way and then maybe finding out they're another way, something like that. But part of that, you can totally see how it would happen in terms of fraternal correction. If somebody brings something to you that you're not aware that you're doing or that it's wrong or something like that, like it could be an unstable experience, you know? So, so like, what is fraternal correction? And then we're going to get into sharing some of our experiences of being fraternally corrected. All right. So gospel from this past weekend was Matthew 18:15-20. So it says, Jesus spoke to his disciples, if your brother or sister sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If he or she listens to you, you have regained your brother or sister. But if the person does not listen, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the person refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if that person refuses to listen to even the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly, I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly, I tell you, if 2 of you on earth agree about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. So it's like tying fraternal correction to the unity of the body of Christ.
That's actually beautiful. I've never like realized those are so connected before. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I was thinking, because it is definitely about the body of Christ. Like it's not just about, it's not just like it's between me and you, you know, if you sin against me, it's like clearly it's not, because I have to this is about the whole body. But on the between me and you part of it, the thing that I was thinking was also that passage about the log in your own eye and the splinter in your brother's eye. And I think that's all, the two are really good.
Right.
They need to be sort of held together, you know, because that's the only, I think that's the only way that we could be good at sort of receiving and giving fraternal correction.
And I think there's something key in this where we are giving fraternal, when you're called to give fraternal correction to somebody, it's not because you see that they are wrong and you know what's right. It's because they have sinned against you and you're hurt in some way, and you are not in unity with them anymore. And in order, there's like a trust too. Like if I'm thinking about this in the context of marriage, right? And like I've been, you know, things that I've learned is that if I'm viewing a situation and I'm annoyed because I'm like, well, I know what the right thing is, and like he's wrong about this, and I want to make sure that he's right with me, like he, you know, that's not a conversation that's going to go well. You know, because it's actually coming from a place of pride. And I think it's easy to think about fraternal correction of where it's like almost from a prideful place of like, well, I know what's right, like I can see it so clearly, and I want to help other people to be right too. Like actually no, that's not the point. But it's about, okay, something happened and I'm feeling hurt, or I've done something and now he's feeling hurt, and we both love each other and we want to be united, we want to be on the same page. And so in order to come back together, whoever has been hurt, who has been sinned against, needs to come to the other person. You know, if the other person has no clue that they've hurt them, right? I need to go and tell Nathan, or he needs to kind of tell me like, hey, when you did such and such, you hurt me, and we have to work through that. But it's not about who is right and wrong. It's about that personal relationship. It's about relationship. I don't know if I'm articulating this super well.
Yeah. No, it's good. I was gonna say, because it also can be the case that the person didn't sin directly against you, and we can still be in that place where we need to give fraternal correction. Like I'm thinking about if somebody was like, I don't know, like in charge of a ministry or group or something like that, it might be necessary. Or like seminary formation, or like, you know, religious, or which is true. But it's also exactly like you said, Nicole, there's still a repairing of a relationship that needs to occur there, like probably between those two people, but also between that person and the church or the particular body that they're in, or, you know, the body of Christ or whatever. And it still has to be based, whether we're giving or we're receiving fraternal correction. If there's not a basis of like deep humility, then it's like it can just go so wrong, you know?
Yeah. And I think in a certain sense, it's not like, to sort of qualify, Nicole, what you're saying, because I agree. Like it really is about relationship. But sometimes it's possible if you're in a relationship with someone who very virtuous and holy and good, that you might sin against them and they would be able to like not be hurt by it. Actually, like they would be able to like see you in sort of a fraternal way or filial way and just like have a lot of compassion for you and not actually take it personally, even though you personally did sin against them. But even in that case, they would still be within sort of what God is saying in this passage to be, you know, to provide some correction potentially in that situation, because there is an objective damage done, because sin is damaging. So sometimes people can absorb the impact of sin in a very whole way, because, you know, they've just sort of grown so much in their relationship with God. But even if they have, it still might occur to them like, yeah, you know what, I should bring this up with this person because it's not good. It's not good. It still does damage the relationship, even though I'm able to take it. And I could move on in a certain sense without holding this against that person. But in a way, I would be doing them a disservice to not make them aware like this was off. And there is something objective to that too, because sin, there is an objective sort of dimension. So I'm not trying to like, I think it's both and, but I totally agree with you that it's not like the objective dimension comes through like how you know that is like through the church and then through like in your relationship that has to be tied to humility, because it's like it can't be just that like I know it's right and you're not right. Like that pride, it's very dangerous. Like pride is very dangerous in context.
And I think there is, having to come from a place of love is key. And I think Rachel, like, because at first I wasn't sure if I totally agreed with that, because it can become like we're not correcting in the sense of a parent correcting a child, I don't think. But I can think of an example in my life where like a long time ago, like went on a date with somebody, and then, you know, wasn't super hot about the way that they acted with me on the date, but also just like wasn't interested. But it was something where, and then they asked me on another date and I said, no, not interested. And I always thought about like, gosh, I could have shared to say, hey, you know, you specifically, you did X, Y, Z, and I felt uncomfortable, or like, and it was something where I'm like, hey, whatever. Like it was sort of just thought, and I was like, oh, this is just kind of immature behavior, but like whatever. It didn't like affect me deeply or something. But it was the kind of behavior where I'm like, yeah, I could have maybe said something because
it might have affected that person and their like future.
Right. Because it was more uncomfortable for me to say something, and it would have been actually the more loving thing,
and maybe the more humble thing.
Exactly, the more humble thing and the more vulnerable thing in an appropriate way, to just say, hey, you know, when you did this I wasn't comfortable with that, and like just might be something to think about on, you know, I think you're a great person, but just maybe to bring this to your awareness, right? I didn't do that. I think maybe that's a case where I could have done that, and that would have been the more loving. So yeah.
And I've had experiences on both ends, like where I've received and where I would call it fraternal correction, but it's like very loosely used, where it's like in the moment, it didn't really hurt. I knew that it was wrong, or like the other person knew it was wrong what I did. It didn't hurt me, but I knew that, but it wasn't the moment to say that. But then I just was aware of it. And then some later point in that friendship or relationship, an opportunity arose where the person was sort of waking up to themselves in a particular area of their lives. And it seemed very like really appropriate to be like, not to pile on them, but to be like, yeah, you know what, like what you're thinking, this was an example where I might have I experienced something I think that you're talking about here. Like, what do you think, you know, does that connect with where you're at right now? Like, it doesn't have to be done. And I think when you're sort of thinking, when you're in sort of the you're under the sort of the cloak of love, like genuinely love, and also of that log in your eye situation, where you're like deeply aware, like, yeah, I'm not really giving this to you from a point of view of like, well, I'm over here and you're over here and I'm gonna, but more like we're really walking beside each other, and there's a true sense in which we're really brothers, like we're really brothers and sisters, we're really kind of in need of one another. Then the correction isn't coming so much from a place of like up down. It's really coming from a place of like, hey, yeah, we're walking together, like, yeah, this kind of happened, like, what do you, and you're kind of working through it together.
It's like the person is already right. If somebody is already kind of growing in their awareness and you're able to help them clarify that, like it's almost still you're assisting them in taking a step that they've already started to take or something like that in that awareness. Yeah.
I can remember like when I was with I just started with a group of religious sisters here in Ottawa for about a year and a half. And when I was there, I remember having, and this is like a very specific forum for fraternal correction in terms of like religious life and whatever. But I remember it just being like horrible, like to take in some senses. And when I think about it now, I'm like, part of that is 100% because I was so prideful about my relationship with the Lord and like, how dare you say something to me if Jesus hasn't said it to me directly? But I'll give you like a very basic example was one time when I met with the sister and she said, we need you to have lighter footsteps in the house. And I was like, F you. Which I did not say at the time, but in my head I was like, that's offensive. Why are you like that's because it came with a lot of stuff because I'm like, I've struggled with my weight for a long time and it's like I feel so conscious. So if you're saying that to me and I don't feel like the relationship was actually deep enough or built on enough understanding for us to be able to have like a vulnerable and open conversation about that. And it wasn't like it had nothing to do with that. It's now I totally recognize because I'm like at my parents' house and my dad stomps around like an elephant everywhere and it's disturbing to me. Like in the morning when I'm like, oh yeah, that was 100% reasonable for them to ask that 100%. But it was like, it was a very, like, it was almost wounding because because I didn't have a firm enough basis in humility to be able to receive it well. And because they didn't have a firm enough basis in relationship with me to be able to express it in a way that was loving as opposed to either condemning or something like that, you know?
Right.
And I'm just thinking also maybe clarification that this type of correction, I don't know if this is correct, but I'm thinking it is distinct from the kind of correction that is sort of from a place of genuine authority, like in terms of like if you're religious and you have a spiritual director and your spiritual director actually has like a real authority over you that in the spiritual life and in your vocation that is kind of different than, you know, if your brother has sinned against you.
I think there's a different kind of. It would be in terms of like procedural things, I think, like if your spiritual director says like what to pray and how to pray or things like that. But I still think it would fall under the realm of like fraternal correction if they were saying something that was a correction of a moral or character defect.
Right.
Does that make sense?
But I guess what I'm saying is I think you're right. It would fall under this, but I think, maybe to clarify what I'm thinking is maybe the principles that would apply there would maybe be a little bit different than how we would think about, you know, I mean, I think they would be different than how we would think about just, you know, lay people working, even in ministry, like lay people working with each other, living together, you know, that dynamic is not the same.
Yeah.
So they're different principles. And I don't have any experience in, you know, religious.
Even in religious life, like there's varying ways that different communities look at fraternal correction and obedience and what it means to be obedient versus to have a conversation versus to like there's so many different ways of looking at it. So it's like very diverse.
Nuanced. Yeah.
It's very nuanced.
And so is this, but I guess we're more because of our experiences and who we are, we're really talking in the realm of in
everyday life kind of.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. And that's something that, so Nathan and I we've been married for just over a year. And I feel like this idea of fraternal correction is something that we're like learning how to figure out in marriage, right? Because we're both like, we've openly discussed the concept of fraternal correction and both said, okay, like I am open to this. I want you to help me see where I need to grow, right? But at the same time, I think that we're learning that it takes a lot of like sensitivity and love to both know when to give that fraternal correction and it's not appropriate all the time.
No, yeah, that's right.
And then how to receive it, so we do what we call our counsel. And it was there's some married couple did this blog, and they have this like weekly kind of check-in with each other, and they ask a series of questions. I think I might have mentioned this on the podcast before. So we started doing this when we were dating, and we've continued to do it because we found it helpful. But you ask each other things like, so what's something that brought you joy this week? What's something that was difficult for you this week? How can I pray for you this week? What's something I can do for you? Is there anything that's gone unsaid, like unspoken hurts or resentments or things like that? That's always a scary one. And then what's a dream or thought or desire that's been on your heart this week? And then we have like the fun ones like ask me a question. But we've added a couple of things. One is well, it's sort of become two separate categories, but like an affirmation to like affirm the person for the week. And then we have a section we call like fraternal correction. And so it's that time where, okay, if I have something that I feel like I need to bring as a fraternal correction, like this is the time and place for it. And so then we both know, oh, like I can be prepared to receive it in that moment, or I know that that's an appropriate time to bring something up because we've agreed like we do this Monday nights typically. And so that's been helpful, but then it's this thing of like you can hear that in so many relationship advice, like talking about I statements, right? When you did X, I felt whatever. And I think that is still a helpful format for fraternal correction. Like if I say, or if he says to me, or if I say to him, like, you do this and that's just bad, whatever it is, like we often find I find that that's less helpful, where if Nathan says, when you did this, like I was really hurt. And then sometimes it's a thing where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I probably do that a lot. I'm not even aware of it. And or something that I just like, I need to work on because it's, I think when you phrase it like that, it's because you're trusting in the love of the other person as well. It's a statement of trust saying, when you did this, it hurt me. And I know you don't want to hurt me. So that's why I want to tell you. Right. And so I think that's how we found it's still helpful to give those fraternal corrections, even though I feel like when you think of a fraternal correction, it sounds much more like you did this and it's bad,
Right. Yeah.
But that's I don't think that's never been a helpful, if the times when I maybe approached it and be like, hey, you do this, and like I think you should try something different, or you should that doesn't it's I don't know, like that doesn't ever seem very helpful. But I don't know, we're still learning how to navigate that. And
I think it's like so it's a really vulnerable thing to both correct someone and receive correction. And I think I like that idea that in marriage you sort of have a time. I like that because it's like you can prepare your heart in a way. Okay. Yeah. There might be something.
Some friends of mine who are married call it the circle of trust.
Yeah.
Like they sit down, they're like circle of trust time.
That's
and
cute.
then they can like,
Yeah, that's really beautiful. But there's in reality, like in reality, in the sort of other aspects of our lives where we don't have that kind of relationship with someone, like a spousal relationship or a really intimate relationship. It might be like at work or like, I mean, that's not fraternal correction, but like, it's just an example of correction where like there is, and sometimes it can happen in the church where someone is noticing something that you're doing like wrong that needs to be pointed out to you, in some way. And I think it can sometimes catch you really off guard. Like you're just kind of going about your life and you're not really aware of yourself. And then suddenly someone comes up and holds a mirror to you and they're like, this is really bad, and it sort of can shock you. And I think one thing that, because I don't remember where it says this in scripture, this is sort of about God's relationship with us, but it talks about how God disciplines the ones he loves, and so sometimes that discipline comes through some kind of fraternal correction. And regardless in a certain sense of how somebody does it, they might have done it really badly. I think for me, one of the things that's been helpful, because I've experienced it done well and experienced it done very badly with me. But in both cases, there's a way, my response to the situation is sort of changes the game.
Mm-hmm.
I realize that one lens that I can adopt is that when someone tells me like you did something bad, my brain goes, you are bad, because that's what I think all of this is. And I think it's really helpful to go back to the Lord with that thing and be like, Lord, help me know that you made me good, but I'm a sinner. Like I do sin. This is a sin that I committed, or this is a bad thing I did. But I am loved. I am not at my heart, at my core, bad. I'm loved. I am yours at my core. And just like reject the lie that I think that Satan always wants us to hear when we're being corrected, which is so disadvantageous, right? Because we hear that lie and that's all we hear. Like, you are bad. And then like the helpful thing that actually could help
can just
you
fall by the wayside,
totally
like get buried.
Like, you're paralyzed. You're like paralyzed by this awful rejection that you feel so deeply.
Yeah.
I think it's really helpful for me to try to fight that, to like recognize actually that the rejection that I feel in those moments may not even be in any way the intention of the other person. But even if it is, it's definitely the work of evil to try to distract me from a work of love that God is trying to do in my life,
Yeah.
So to
I think that's I think that's a really beautiful point of like how to receive fraternal correction well, because you're right. Anytime it's so easy for that temptation to come into to just then get all focused on ourselves and like, oh my gosh, like either be like, wow, that person is like totally out of bounds in saying that, and like how dare they, and like they don't even know me and blah 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 whatever, or oh my gosh, I'm
the worst.
I am the worst. I am terrible, but just to bring that to the Lord and say, okay, Lord, this was really tough. Help me, like you put this in perspective for me, right? But I think that is an invitation then for someone who feels called to give a fraternal correction, is to say, okay, how can I do this in a loving way that is going to not I don't want any of my words to contribute to that temptation, right? So I don't want to basically make the person feel like they're the worst, in the way that so how can I come humbly and vulnerably and say, when, I'm hurt, I felt, right? Because it's actually a very humbling thing to say, like, I'm hurt, you hurt me, because it says that you
have an effect in my life.
You had an effect in my life. You had power over me. I was weak here and you were strong. You know what I mean? Like it's a kind of it's a very but that coming into a fraternal correction from a position of vulnerability, I think that is a way to, maybe not all the time, but can be a way to circumvent some of those temptations, right? And
I feel like also, even what you're talking about, Rachel, it can also be true that, like, I'm just thinking again back to my experience with the sisters, and if there's one thing that I learned that year and a half, it was whenever I received some kind of fraternal correction, and my spiritual director, she was the one who said this to me. She's like, don't say anything, just say thank you so much for that when you receive it, and then go and sit with the Lord and then let him sort it out and show you. And seriously, so many times it was like,
so much.
He would like, I was convicted so many times, like, oh, this is a valid, like, but coming from him, I needed to hear from him, because it's like,
ooh, that's
because
good.
he fraternally corrects perfectly. He doesn't crush us under the weight of our own sin or our own character defects or our own anything, right? Like, so when he talks about, like, it's perfect timing from him, it's with perfect love, it's with perfect phrasing, it's with perfect, even if it's like difficult things to hear, like from him, there's just such a tenderness and a mercy and a gentleness that's like imbued in it, that it makes it receivable,
right. It's kind of like saying, if someone gives you the gift of fraternal correction, like no human can do this perfectly, and I think I like to think about ways to try to do it well, but like it's never gonna be perfect. So then you take the kind of like weird misshapen gift that's been given to you and say, hey Lord, look what I just got, like can you please unscramble this for me, right? And don't take it into your heart until you let the Lord put it in the right shape, so that it was, oh, sorry, you go, Rach, and then I
I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I love Catherine Doherty has this concept of the laundry of love. I think I've talked about it a few times here, but I like this thing that this advice that you're giving, Erin, about that you received about going to the Lord, because I think the laundry. So her concept of the laundry of love is whatever you receive and whatever you give. So all your speech that comes from you and all the speech that you take in from others try to put it through this like laundromat inside in your interior life of love, and let it be filtered by love, so that what is left is what is the gift of love in some way, you know. But the thing is, our laundromats are really, really a mess. So and like there's good parts and there's wonky parts, and things are broken and things are working. And so I think putting ourselves in front of the Lord is such a good way to be like, okay, you work the laundromat here. Like you put this through the laundry of love for me so that I can receive love at the end of the day. And I think, it's so wonderful too for me to think about it as a true exercise in humility. And humility is just really about the truth. Like being humble is just knowing truth in reality. Who I am.
Yeah, who we are before God. Yeah.
That's it. Exactly. And who I am and who God is. That is what humility is. So it's like, okay, it's a wonderful opportunity to actually know in this moment better who I am and who God is, which is not to take every single thing that person said to me, but it is to let God then speak the truth again to me, you know?
Well, and I think that's exactly it.
And you can do the same thing like on the front end too. Like, so let's say you're the one who feels like, man, I need to tell this person this thing, right? Like to give that fraternal correction. But to take that to prayer first and say, okay, Lord, like this is weighing on me. I feel a rift here, whatever it is, right? How do you want me to bring this up? What should I say? When should I say it? Will you purify me first so that I say it? Because I think sometimes we could trick ourselves and say something in the heat of the moment, and in our mind we're like, well, I'm fraternally correcting and blah 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 because I'm in the right, and it's like, well, okay, maybe that's not the most loving and humble way to give, right? So how can that's like taking
how can we launder that
banging someone over the head with it, right? But like, can you launder it first? Can you actually be patient and take the time and do that in love, right?
Well,
which is hard, because
it is hard.
So hard.
It's hard to do that.
But I think that's like, I'm not saying I do that perfectly, but I think the times that I have done that, and I think I maybe will, I'm probably somebody who errs on the side of being afraid to fraternally correct, because it means conflict, and I don't like conflict and I'd rather avoid it. But that the Lord sometimes will call me to have those conversations. And sometimes in those thinking about how am I gonna, what should I say? The Lord reminds me of my own shit,
Yeah, totally.
And then it kind of puts things in perspective, so that when I then share a fraternal correction, it can be from, it can be something to where it's like, okay, this happened, this has hurt me, I feel this is on my heart, but like, you take this and you discern that, or what, I don't know, there can be ways to even.
It's so funny, even when you say like the erring on the side, because as soon as you said that, I'm like 100%. I'm the other way for sure. I'm like, let's get it out on the table. Let's just like lay it all out. Let's just like sort it out. Like, but I still, one of the things that I love, or that I think really does actually happen when, like, as we grow in our relationship with the Lord, and even as we receive fraternal correction, is that we grow in a desire to receive fraternal correction, even if it's like, even if it's hard, like there's something, because there is a way that we, like, that our desire to grow, like we know in our head that in our desire to grow, there are things that that may be inhibiting our growth in holiness, or like whatever the case may be. And I'm just like, I'm thinking back to the specific experience from net, the year that I was on net, which totally relates to like the avoiding conflict, going into conflict, because my net team was 7 people and 6 of them were introverts, and then me. So I was like,
gosh.
So you have like everybody, and they were, and not, I mean, they were like, my net team was beautiful. I love all the people on my net team, and because we were all invested, which is really beautiful. But there was one time that I remember that I had talked to the team about, like, I really, and 100%, I think I was like sharp edged. I wasn't polished when I was saying it, but I was like, we need to have more conflict resolution as a team, because nobody's come up and shared anything with me this year. And that's like, and then later one of my teammates talked to me and said, like, nobody's shared anything with you because they're afraid that you're going to be, I don't know, I can't even remember what she said. It wasn't vindictive, but like that I'm going to be bristly, or I'm not going to receive it. But the thing is that was actually deeply wounding for me, because I had not had any conflict resolution with anybody. So it wasn't based in experiences that, you know what I mean? Like with the other team members where they had bad experiences and then were hesitant to. It's just that they were too afraid to even try, because I have a strong personality, which is totally true. And because I'm like, can be rough around the edges, which is totally true. But the reason that it was so wounding for me is like partly because it felt like they didn't even care enough to try. But also because I was like, don't you love me? Like, don't you desire holiness for me too?
Right.
And if that's the case, like how can I grow if I don't know how I can grow? Like, it makes me think of Dr. Josie Lombardi has a great line that she says often in her classes, which is like, what does it feel like to be in my presence? Which is like such a huge, a beautiful thing for self-knowledge. And then I think also for fraternal correction, because it's like, I mean, often, if we want to admit it, probably I would say for the most part, if somebody's bringing something to us, it's not something that's like totally unknown, or you know what I mean? Like if they're bringing something, it's like we kind of probably have a sense like of maybe, oh yeah, I'm a jerk in this way. I kind of know, it's not too often that it's like totally out of left field, but
yeah.
I
mean, I think another kind of aspect of that is it's just maturity sometimes. Like you just kind of like, because in some ways you do need to know you're loved before you can really enter into this in a healthy way. I mean, but it's messy, right? Sometimes like God introduces us to these realities in our lives in messy kinds of ways, and it's organic and good that in that sense. But it's like, I mean, there's a progression where even I'm just thinking of your nut team is like, maybe, they weren't in a place where they were able to sort of overcome their fears. And that's also sometimes, I'm not calling them, and I mean, I'm not saying they were immature, but sometimes it's like a youth thing. It's like a young thing where you're like, I don't have the skills, the tools. I don't know how to have these conversations. And it was good that one person came and said that to you, because then maybe you explained to them like, okay, but I wish that you did, because this was important. And so it's a learning too, as being the body. So going back to kind of that scripture passage, it's like this ultimately isn't about giving or receiving fraternal correction just in certain specific circumstances, but understanding that we are part of the body always, like in everything. And so we are, in a sense, like we really are, we do belong to each other. And then
I should also say, just with the net team, just as like a put that in a box and stick it away, 100% after like the year and wading through all of those kind of things and being older now with perspective, I'm like, yeah, I totally get where they were coming from. Like 100%. In the moment, it was really difficult for sure. But the thing, like just bringing it back to desire, is that it, like, I think that was the first time that I really recognized that I actually had the desire to be corrected.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah, which is beautiful. And I think there's something too of like what Rachel, you're saying is like, in a sense, like it's not, we're focusing a lot on like how to do it and when to do it, but the thing is like, actually we're just called to do this. Like we are not called to be in silos and figure out our spiritual life on our own. Like we are actually called to lovingly correct each other, right? But I think like Erin, what your example is making me think is that it is like it's also a responsibility to think about, well, how can I fraternally correct this person in a way that will make them feel loved and will actually have the effect that it's intended, right? Which for you is like just like
straight up,
clear, straight up, open, and just honest, and like having it out, right? Whereas if I think of myself as like an extremely sensitive introvert, and I can think of times where I've been corrected in my life, and it's like I am totally devastated if it's not done in a way that is gentle and
that like sees your beautiful heart,
right,
and knows that your beautiful heart would never intend to hurt somebody,
right? Like, otherwise I just like I'll just cry. I'll just cry for a long time. And so it's also like, just learning our and I think that's the beautiful thing about like that this is supposed to come in the context of the relationship, right? So do we know this person? Do we know their area? And because it's like I'm thinking of this again in marriage, like I know my husband's stuff and he knows my stuff. And like there's a way that I could give him fraternal correction that would be really wounding. Because, like I could know how to really hurt him and he could know how to hurt me because we know his stuff. And so I'm called to not do that, right? And to use the fraternal and to do it in a way that I know will be loving, in particular to him. And that will be affirming and also like calling him to a higher place, and like he can do that for me too, right? So just like knowing your person, right? Knowing how to fraternally correct them in love.
And listen, to close the net box, I cut you off before, Rachel. So just please forgive me.
Erin, that'd be honestly, I did not care at all. I was like, what are we talking? Right? Oh yeah.
I was like, it could be just a live on air example of
just like beautiful fraternal apologizing. Right. I literally did not track that at all.
Okay, good.
No, I also think, at least in my experience in my life, I have found that, Chesterton's quote about like angels can fly because they don't take themselves they take
themselves lightly.
Yeah, something like that. I just pictured it thinking. And I think fraternal correction in my life has been a wonderful avenue in which to learn to take myself less and less seriously, because I think I'm somewhere in the middle of both of you, but not more, maybe more leaning towards your side, Nicole, than Erin's side. Like I'm more sensitive, especially growing up. And honestly, I'll say this is not fraternal correction. It's just correction in general. I remember in high school, I did like a co-op semester and I worked at these different places, and my supervisor, I worked at a hospital, at a rec therapy ward. My supervisor needed to correct me. And this was one like out of left field situation, because I was confused about how she wanted me to do things, and I was scared to get clarification because I was really nervous. And so I just was doing it the way I thought she meant, but I got it wrong. And so she called me to her office and she like corrected me. And I have a friend who has the same problem. I just like couldn't help it. I just like started tearing up and like started crying. I was like, oh my gosh. And I didn't want to, but I did. Right. It was like so hard. And she was like comforting me, and it was so awful. It was just the worst.
That's so great.
And I remember like, because I was so like, and I didn't want to be sensitive, but I just was, because I had some kind of brokenness or woundedness that just was being poked at, through correction. And really, it was the part of me that was like, you are fundamentally not good. And this person figured it out. You know what I mean? Like, so it was like, for me, it was like this idea of, it's not my whole self, but there's an area of my life where achievement really defined me. And so it's like where I failed, it was not just a failure of action. It was me. Like that's who I am. And everybody now knows. So anyways, when working through all of those things, I realized like it was measurable, where I could see that, when someone was correcting me, however they did it, at one point it was just I couldn't control my reaction to that. And then slowly over time, learning to do that, but not by sort of controlling my emotions, but like learning that I was loved, like constantly going back to the source, going back to the Lord, and like being invested in by him has given me over time, like a measurable, like strength to be able to receive correction. And I'm still nowhere near like really good at it at all, but I don't cry necessarily sometimes, but often not, just automatically. Right. And that's like really, and it's really empowering. So kind of speaking to your thing about desiring correction, I don't know if I desire it, but I think I'm much less afraid of it than I used to be.
Right.
because before it was like getting corrected felt like dying, you know?
Right. Yeah. Right.
And for some people that's the case because you're an overachiever, you're a perfectionist and or whatever. And so like correction to you is like, I am a total piece of crap, like, you know, but that's not true, obviously. And then knowing who you really are, again, the humility thing, then it's like over time, you actually get stronger. And that is encouraging. It's like doing something and making small improvements in it. And it's just so positively reinforcing. Where you're like, oh, okay, I'm not going to die when someone corrects me. Like, maybe I'll even get better.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And I think like I'm hearing that and I'm like, I definitely have a ways to go in receiving correction. It's hard for me. And I will cry probably every single time, you know? But then it's just also accepting like, okay, maybe this is just how I process it too.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's okay.
Yeah. You know,
like crying is not a bad thing.
Yeah. 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 I still remember like, because with the two things, right? I think this is kind of what a lot of what we're saying is the one thing of having that relationship with the Lord that we fall back on all the time because he knows the truth of who we are, that even if we're like receiving something that's difficult or receiving some information about ourselves that's unsettling or feels hurtful or things like that, it's like having that, being able to come back into the loving arms of the Lord who loves us so beautifully, even amidst every imperfection that we have, that he knows them way more than we do. He knows all my imperfections. I don't even know all my imperfections. You know? And then so it's like that. And then also that generally fraternal correction is best in the context of an already established relationship of trust and love, right? Like, because otherwise it's like, I can still remember being at the Newman Centers. So I used to work, for those who are listening, at the Newman Center at the University of Toronto, and we had a student residence, so students would live. And at the beginning of the year, we would talk about conflict resolution, and we would just give each other permission, like say out loud, I give you all permission to come to me if I do something that hurts you. And even just like saying that does something. So like whether we have friends or whatever that we can say that to, it does something to our hearts. Like, oh, I gave you permission. I'm opening up this channel of dialogue. So in some way, it's kind of like we can expect some of these things to come and not be, because we've invited them, you know, and we want them, and we want to work with whatever little desire we have to like grow or to change, or even if it's difficult, you know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that can be a really powerful thing to do, even just like in a marriage or at a workplace or on a team. You know, what a powerful leadership thing to do if you're a leader, to say, hey, I'm in charge of this thing, but I'm open to, you know. I mean, I receive student feedback at the end of every year, and I'm not going to lie, I work really hard to make sure that those feedback things are positive. I want it, but to do that, I try to actually seek feedback throughout the semester ongoing, so that it doesn't just bottle up and come out on my, you know, student things. So we do, and it's sometimes, it's like, I'm like, oh yeah, I know I'm doing this. I know I'm teaching this way, and you're telling me, okay, and I haven't fixed it yet. Okay, you know, it's just like, it is hard, but I think that that students appreciate that. That I'm open to that. So I like that, Erin, like any context to actually just say the words, I am open to you correcting me.
Yeah, which is good.
And I think
that's right. Good.
I was just thinking, what kind of wrapping up a lot of kind of what we're saying in those two poles, like you pointed out, Erin, is like communion is the goal. Like that's the goal. So to keep that in mind too, like this is about real communion, not just feeling nice in each other's like, but genuinely loving one another and being in communion with each other. So.
And that can be a good kind of litmus test if you're thinking of giving someone fraternal correction. Is like, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I know that this is necessary in order for us to be back in communion, or am I doing it for some other reason? If it's for some other reason, then I don't know, you know, just may not be a good reason. But,
then you should write it on a piece of paper and burn the piece of paper and never speak of it to it. Anyway. Okay, good. This is good. So I'm going to share the God wink for this week because it's super timely, I guess. It was just so like I went to mass today, and I had messaged the girls. I was like, do you think we could meet a little bit later so I could go to this mass? But then I decided to go to an earlier mass. And anyways, so I ended up at the 4:30 mass, and the preacher who preaches there, his name is Father Martin Farrell. If anybody is in Ottawa or you've met him before, he's like kooky and funny and like, but solid, but like sometimes you can't. Anyways, he's just like in the homily, he'll like lean over the pulpit and he'd be like, "You with me? Who's with me? Who's with me?" You know?
I love
and
it.
normally I hate that.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, just say do the right thing, whatever. Anyways, but he was good. And he was preaching on fraternal correction. And he used the words fraternal correction in his homily. And I was like, Lord, this is so funny. I wasn't even going to come to this mass today. And you were, and I just felt like I should just go to the earlier one, you know, just in case. And then he was talking about the reading from last weekend and fraternal correction. And his example was of this girl, who had gone to a parish that he was at before and was like a teenager and then stopped going for a number of years and then came back. And when he was talking to her about it, she said that the thing that was most impactful or that she was really surprised about is that nobody asked her why. Like nobody touched base and was like, "Hey, I haven't seen you. Are you coming? Are you?" Right. So she was like, so I felt like it didn't matter whether I was there or not. So I just was like, I'm not going to, you know? Yeah. And so he kind of like strongly exhorted everybody in the pews. He's like, you know, we have a responsibility for each other. And, you know, getting each other to heaven is a big responsibility and we will be held to account for that. Yeah. And I was like, like where? But it really does, like, you know, this is one of those topics sometimes that I think we tend not to think about sometimes because it can be more uncomfortable or just involves a lot of vulnerability, you know, but yeah, but anyway, so I was just like laughing, like he's talking about this serious thing and I'm just like in the pews trying not to laugh. And he's one of those guys who would like point at you and be like, "What's so funny?"
And then you'd be like, stand up. "Well, Father, we have a podcast on suffering." And
that's right. That's right.
Everybody would be horrified.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Anyways, so that was good. Cool. But good. This was really helpful for me. I loved this conversation was good. It was a good one.
Now I feel like I just said how I'm like less afraid of it. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, when's it coming? You know, I'm just sort of like, when is it coming, Lord? Like I can feel it coming for me.
No, the Lord is going to shield you for the rest of the semester at least. And then you can work on your, you know, inner whatever after that. You just don't worry.
I sin against my brother.
So hopefully if anybody's listening now and they were thinking about calling Rachel,
hold it in. Hold it in.
Suck it up. Jesus is not coming before December, probably. So that's fine. Oh, anyways, okay. So we are very happy that you joined us this week to listen / watch if you're joining on YouTube.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. We love being with you guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Thicket. If you like what you hear, give us a rating and hit that subscribe button. We have new episodes every Monday with more stories and honest conversations about life when the going gets rough and the hope and humor amidst it all. We'd love for you to join our community on Instagram and Facebook at In the Thicket Podcast. While you're there, let us know how we can pray for you. God bless and see you next week.